I suppose I should start off by talking or relating how I came to Baba, unless most of you know. Some years ago, I didn't know anything at all about deeper spiritual teachings. At one point, I began to feel a very strong need to discover something much more meaningful in life. It was a very imperative need. And those things that I began to realize were the levels, higher levels of living I began to put into practice in the best way I knew how. I tried to examine my motives for those things that I said and did. I tried to avoid doing those things that were obviously selfish pursuits. And the result of that was that I began to feel different. So the experience itself was very meaningful to me. At this time, I began to discover meaning everywhere I looked. I read things that most everyone was familiar with, but these things had a great deal of meaning at that time because I suppose I was beginning to wake up. I had a cousin who told me about a party she had attended, a cocktail party, and at that cocktail party she had met a girl who was very remarkable. And my cousin really couldn't tell me very much, she couldn't tell me anything about this girl's story, philosophy, concerning some teachings she had attended. But the very fact that my cousin was impressed, and she was not an easy person to impress, because she was so impressed, I kept thinking about it. And it was about a year later when one day walking down, I should say that the girl that she was referring to was the sister of somebody I had gone to law school with, or was going to law school with. So a year later, I was walking down the street in downtown Richmond. It was a very busy street. And I saw the brother of this girl, and the girl was with him, and there was another man. Now, of course, I wouldn't have recognized the girl, but I did recognize my friend and also fraternity brother. So we went into a restaurant and had some coffee, but because of the other two people, I didn't approach the subject of just what it was that she had attended. So I felt, well, now that I know that she's here, I'll make it a point to run into her again or call her or something. Well, that very same afternoon, I was crossing the street in downtown Richmond, and this time I saw her and she was alone. And now, of course, I could recognize her. So then I took the occasion to ask her what it was that she had studied that made such an impression on my cousin. And she told me about some lectures she had attended in Waynesboro, Virginia, given by a Dr. Walter Russell. And it so happens that she was leaving for Europe the next morning, and I would not have seen her and did not see her again for years. So that evening she called me and said she had no more of his material or books, and so I wrote to Dr. Russell, found out about the fact that he gives a 2-week course there every year. So I enrolled in that course and went to the top of Afton Mountain. Well, Dr. Russell was a remarkable man. He had said that he never went to school because God was his teacher, and he was a proven genius in so many fields. But the important thing was that he recommended only 2 books, and one of those 2 books was the Bhagavad Gita. I read the Bhagavad Gita, and I was very impressed with it. Very impressed with it. It said to me many things that I felt I had discovered within myself. The introduction to the book was written by Aldous Huxley, who was on the editorial board for the Vedanta Society in Southern California. And through them I learned of a Swami Nikolananda in New York City. I got all of his books, or a number of books, concerned with Vedanta, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the complete works of Vivekananda, volumes of the Upanishads, Self-Knowledge, and others that I don't remember the names of. And I read all of them. I just started practicing, and I used to lock my office door so that nobody would disturb me. And I wrote to Nikolananda in New York and said, I am tired of reading. I want to meet someone who has experienced the reality I am now convinced exists. And his reply to me, he was leaving for Europe also, and he told me I should come to see him in New York in September. And he said, one such as Ramakrishna comes along perhaps once in 500 years. It would be no doubt a great stroke of fortune if you had that opportunity, but it is not necessary for your progress. So, after that, a friend of my wife's came down to see us, and I told her all of the things that I had learned, and they impressed her enormously. She said she went back to New York, and she was walking on clouds for weeks. December of 1955, I received a book in the mail from her entitled God Speaks. It was our Christmas present. She later said that she had gone past some small bookstore. I thought perhaps it may have been Samuel Weiser's. I remember asking Ivy Deuce the other night. Murshida Ivy Deuce, for those of you who don't know her, is the Murshida of the Sufi movement in this country that has been reoriented by Meher Baba. I asked her at that time if there was more than one place that had God Speaks on sale, because that wasn't the easiest book to sell. And she said she didn't remember, but she thought perhaps that may be so. But in any event, looking back, of course, it was no accident. I received the book, and I looked at Baba's picture as he was situated as he was positioned there. I believe it was Arthur's seat in Mahabaleshwar, and read, I believe, the inside of the cover, and picked up the telephone and called this girl in New York City, and I said, Liz, find this man, he is the one. So I waited and waited very impatiently, and finally we talked on the telephone, and she told me that she had gone to the publishers of that book, the company in New York, God Need, and they said that Meher Baba had been in New York in 1952, but they did not expect him to return. And at that point, I wrote a letter to Meher Baba. I felt very sure about my attitude. My conviction was real. And I had no doubt this was the beginning of something, although I did not know just what form it would take. The most meaningful thing in my life, of course, is what I mean. So I wrote a letter to Meher Baba and sent it special delivery airmail. In the letter, I said, Dear Meher Baba, I have your book, God Speaks. It has great meaning for me. I want to meet you, and I don't think that's impossible. I received an airmail reply that Baba had dictated, I believe it was to his sister Mani, if I remember correctly. And he said he would be in New York the following spring and I should make arrangements to see him. And then there came a second letter, and he said, your connection with me is of longer duration than you consciously realize. You are one of the fortunate ones meant to recognize me. And he went on, I don't remember the rest. But that was the beginning. My wife and I went to New York, and I don't remember the thoughts I had. It's only important to remember that from the very first moment I was convinced that he was the authority in the world, the authority. It remained for me to become familiar with his teachings, to understand what authority is, and something of the nature of the spiritual hierarchy. But when I went to New York, my wife went shopping, and I, first because she had to do an errand, her mother wanted her to buy a dress for her brother's engagement party. So Baba was at the Hotel Del Monaco. So I went up first, and she said she'd be along shortly. There were lots of people at the Hotel Del Monaco, and people milling about in the corridor inside this waiting room. Baba was in a separate room. You would go from the corridor into this waiting room, sign your name so that they knew who was there, so that they could make arrangements to give everyone an opportunity to see Baba. I believe you had a great deal to do with that, Marion Florsheim. Yes. I believe Marion Florsheim was also one of the person mentioned in Baba's first letter to me. So you're always special. The time came, I heard people talking about all sorts of things. Somebody came up to me and leaned over some man and he said, do you think he's the Avatar? And things like this were going on in some respects. And of course there were others who were very familiar with Baba. But it was all a new experience for me. I was about to see someone that I felt, and now at this time, because I was now familiar with his teachings, I was about to see someone who I felt to be God in human form, simply because he said he was God in human form, and I would accept anything that he said as being true. I had no difficulty with accepting. It isn't that I experienced him as God in human form, but I did experience total conviction about anything he said. So when I was called in, I saw a man that I had always known. That's the way he appeared to me. And in trying to define what I mean by I had always known him, he looked that way, he looked that familiar to me. I realized in thinking back, because at the time this was implicit in his familiarity to me, I realized in analyzing this concept of familiarity that there was nothing about myself that I would not hesitate to tell him, that he knew everything about me, that no matter what it was I would do, he would never reject me. I was totally, completely at home with him. It was an extraordinary experience. I embraced him and whispered words in his ear that I had never done to anyone else. Certainly no man. I whispered in his ear, I said, I adore you. And other than that, I don't remember what went on. I had tried, in preparing for this meeting, I had tried to my utmost to bring myself, my mind, to the point where it could capitalize on this unequaled opportunity, that it could make the most I realized this to be an opportunity that was truly rare. It was staggering. I could not grasp the full import, or even the tiniest import of it. So I was trying to strip away everything artificial about myself in order that I would avail myself totally of the opportunity that was there. This I failed to do. So when I left the room, I was very, very dissatisfied with that, and I wanted to get back in there, to sit and watch Meher Baba, to watch God in human form. It was incredible to me that God in human form was right in that room, and people were looking at him, watching how he gestured, how he was reclining, noticing every little thing about him. I felt somehow this would draw me close to God, because I felt that the totality of God in a human body couldn't help but reveal something to me. So that was the one thought that was in my mind constantly as I was in that corridor. People were milling about, talking, which I was not aware of what they were saying. I kept waiting for that door to open, because each time someone would come from Baba's presence out into the corridor. So I kept waiting just to get that glimpse, just to see him. And about the third time, a person came out of the room. Erich came over, and he said, "Baba says, what do you want?" So I said, "I want to come back in." I told this story, incidentally, in Berkeley, so it's a repetition for some that may be here. So I went back in, and this time the best I could do was to come to the cold statement, "I want to experience the truth," which had no warmth as far as I was concerned, but it was the best I could do. But I had to say something talking to God. I said, "I want to experience the truth." And Baba smiled at me, a very beautiful, warm smile. That smile that totally accepted me regardless of how I talked or what I was unable to say. And he held up that familiar gesture, that circle of perfection. And he said, "You will experience the truth because I will help you, or I will help you." And whatever else happened during that time, I don't remember. Well, after I was in there for a while, I again left, and this time, finally, my wife arrived. And when she learned that I had been in to see Baba without waiting for her, she was absolutely furious with me. She didn't say anything, but she didn't have to say anything. She was absolutely furious with me. And in those days, she was really a tiger. And I was equally furious with her, because to me it was inconceivable that any woman could not understand how a man would be in another room with God in the next room, and he would not walk in to see him. That made me so furious, and I didn't say anything. And then we were both called in together to see Baba. And this time, when we went in, Baba took one look at us as we crossed the threshold, and he put both of his hands on both sides of his head and went like that. You could cut the tension between us with a knife. It was that thick. We were seated in front of Baba, and he reached up and pulled the earring from her, I believe her left ear, off. And he put it in her hand, and he curled up her fingers around the earring. And then he fed us some grapes. And then I don't remember what happened after that. Well, that's how I came to Meher Baba. Looking back throughout the years, I knew I was looking for something. I was looking for something that was the key to the meaning, that held the key, or that was the key to everything. I remember in college looking for it in every subject I took that had any likelihood of giving it, whether it was philosophy or psychology or something. And that was always there. As a child, I was always concerned about how far I could push somebody before that person would turn on me. I was looking for someone who would accept me totally just the way I was. And so this condition, this mental state, was always at the back. And Meher Baba answered that so fully when I first saw him. So now I found the meaning of life. And what I am here to talk about is what we must do with that meaning. Because in this world, we must, at all costs, try in every way possible to enter into that realm of beauty and love without any delay. There is no meaning in life other than to awaken to the love that Meher Baba is here to give everyone. He is love personified. There is only one short and direct road to God, and that is love. There is only one who can bestow that love, and that is Meher Baba, because he is the Ancient One. It is the Ancient One whose authority it is to give to everyone that wants. That is his authority. It is unlikely that one would become the chosen one of a Sadguru, but it is the opposite when dealing with the God-man, the Avatar, the Messiah, the Rasul. It is his duty to give each one that which that person works and makes an effort for. In order for us to be the recipient of that love, we must surrender to him. In order for us to be able to surrender to him, we must remember him. In order for us to remember him, we must become familiar deeply with his personality as a divine incarnation. The remarkable thing is that Meher Baba is our own self. I'm thinking about the story of that deer, the Kasturi Mriga, who went all of his life chasing that evanescent scent that captivated him. And only finally when he fell off that cliff to his death, and in his dying moments, did he realize that incredible musk scent emanated from his own navel. Meher Baba is our self. That's why we find him beautiful if we look at him. We must open our eyes to see him. Our eyes must be there, but our thought must be there. Our eyes must not be looking vacantly. There is not a moment in the day that should be wasted. We waste so much time. Our lives should be dedicated, not dryly, but joyfully, because the meaning of Baba is, I will never worry again. The meaning of Baba is, there is no reason to not be cheerful every moment. The meaning of Baba is, everything that I was afraid of does not exist. The meaning of Baba is, eternity lies within my own grasp, because He will take my hand whenever I extend it into His. That is the meaning of Baba. It may be necessary for us, and I think it is, to become very familiar with Baba's discourses, with all of his statements, his messages, his revelations about the deeper meaning of life. The deeper meaning of life is the deeper meaning of ourselves. We are the culmination of life. It's extraordinary how we pay so much attention to something that is other than a human being. And yet it took all of creation, the vastness of the galaxies, the staggering vastness in size, the staggering concepts of light years, to bring about the fairest flower of creation, the human being. Because in that human being, consciousness can now become God-realized. So our thoughts must dwell on those truths that have been given to us by our closest friend, God. His statements are our means of pulling up ourselves out of our addicted ignorance, resulting from aeons of impressioned consciousness. Do we think for one moment that we can alter consciousness? Do we think so? Do we know the vast repository of things beyond our conscious mind? That is why Baba said, I am here. I infinitely, divinely love you. I will help you. I will help you. Just remember me. Just think of me. This is his message to us, you see. It's not that we talk endlessly. We must find out how to love Baba. We must find out how to awaken feeling. Do you know, if we have feeling for one another, we are loving Baba then. Because what is Baba? He is everything. He is the sole reality. But certainly our minds cannot grasp that until we begin to work with it. He knows that. He's given us every answer. But the answers are answers on many levels. At first blush, we can comprehend some beautiful meaning. Everything becomes integrated. We see purpose in life. We see movement. We see the order of things. We now have an appreciation that we move up towards that which no man can describe, not even God. Even God can't describe. We must experience Him. But He does not have to describe. He takes us by the hand. And how does He do that? By our surrender. We must be obedient, but obedient from the right heart. You know, it is not enough to build buildings for Baba. It is not enough to print papers for Baba. These things are only right if one has done the first work first. The first work is with ourselves. I remember many times the statement that Baba made because of its meaning. Do not waste your precious lifespan judging and criticizing your fellow man. What we must do is to constantly look for ways within ourselves, from one another, as to how we can remember Meher Baba better. He is the God-man. He walks down the street. He will not be noticed. Do you know this happens? Bear in mind, Meher Baba has walked down many streets. He's walked down streets in New York City, Hong Kong, any number of major capitals, and small places, rural places. Here was this treasure walking down the street, but who knew? Who knew? Do you see what effort has to do? There are those who have known about Meher Baba. There are those who have lived around him. But who knew? Who knew the treasure that was there? Those few who took the time, the effort. Those few who said, this man holds the key to everything. I must do something. And that something that those few would do would be the something that Baba laid out for them to do that was so simple. It was so simple. You've got the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. That's difficult to do. Baba said, remember me, love me, love me, try to see me in one another. Now, do we look one time and not see you as Baba? Do we stop? Do we try to find out in endless ways how Baba is the sole reality that exists? Isn't that what we should be trying to do? Of course it is. Because he has made it easy. He has given us the unequaled opportunity in this avataric period to move out of our ignorance. We all want freedom. Look how we look for it. We look for social freedom. We look for economic freedom. We look for sexual freedom. We look for every conceivable kind of freedom. It's not that we should not be trying to better the rules by which we conduct our lives in organized society, of course. But don't you know that we will do a better job in that direction by drawing close to Baba? Don't you know that a serene mind is recognized by another and is approached by another like a magnet drawing iron filings? Where does that serene mind come from? Try to pursue this, that, and the other, to gain knowledge of psychology. Use all of your techniques. Study anthropology. Study history, the most creative kind that's given by the most creative historian. Study government. Study law. It's like going around in a circle. But those tools become creative when one draws close to Baba. That is the point. Drawing close to Baba is the only work. You will have your predilections as to what field or another you're inclined towards. You will go into that field, but you will then become creative in that field, simply because the first thing has been done. The most important thing is the foundation, because the quality of life is there. The quality of life. Every one of us, everyone here is a king and a queen in the highest sense of the word. Each one of us here has all of the characteristics of the highest nobility. All of us here are deeply moved when we see on the cinematic screen the portrayal of beautiful character. Why? Because we are that. Baba told us we are that. It's not that I said it. He said it. But I recognize it, and so do you. But we must do something about it. We must do something about it. Baba recently said, towards the end, I suppose, or at least it was at some point that indicated a great deal of the work had been accomplished. His physical working was coming to a close. He said, there is no time now for small things, for small instructions. hold on to me. The royal road to our own liberation lies over the threshold that Baba is. Now, there are Baba groups in all parts of the country. And it's very easy for there to be the tendency to forget the most important thing. As I said before, the most important thing is not a lot of movement. It's the quality of life. It's the quality of life. We certainly have seen endless examples of great organization. Every great religion, all of the numbers of branches of the Christian religion certainly have proven that they have organization, they have property, they have buildings, they have numbers, they have networks. There may be very sincere people among them. But if there are very sincere people among them, they're doing what we must do. But look where we are. Look where we are. We know about God in human form. But that's only a beginning. That is not 1 inch down the spiritual path. But the implications, the meaning of knowing and being convinced about God in human form are vast indeed. For aeons we have been facing in one direction. For aeons we have been facing in the direction of illusion. To have conviction about God is to turn around. It does not mean we have negotiated the distance that separates us from Him, but we have turned around and we are face to face with Him. That is an incredible difference. It's an incredible difference. Life can only teach us one thing. Life can only teach us that we made a mistake in not surrendering earlier. That's all each one of our lives will teach us. I can assure you of that. We have that opportunity. How can we say one thing about those who have not the conviction about Baba? It would be incredible. It would be the height of ignorance for us to in any way criticize someone who has no conviction of God on earth. We have the conviction. What have we done about it? We should become a light. Our surrender will transform our spirit, will open our heart. We are all indeed alike. Isn't it something that we pay attention to the very differences which are unreal? And we never think, except in moments, accidentally, when our hearts touch one another. We sometimes respond because it is all there, dormant, latent, but not enough on the surface. I love it when Baba talks about those saints who are on fire within because of their love of God that they see face to face. But there are no cheap utterances coming from their mouths. He says not even one wisp of smoke escapes their lips. What beautiful love. You know, I was lying back there and I was thinking of some of the words that Baba said. And as I was lying there, there'd been a lot of activity today. And I was lying there and I knew Baba was right there. And it was a great sense of relief to know that everyone here has Baba with him. Oh, he's there all right. We are not there all the time, but he's there all right. You see, our work is to be where he is always. Consciously with him. He is consciously with us. Now, you know, there are ways that we have to find to better remember Baba. Because you see, Baba has said that he is consciously aware of each and every one of us at every moment. Now that's a beautiful statement. It's a beautiful statement. But it's only a statement on the first level. Do you realize how many levels we can plumb by really working with that statement? Because the more we work with it, the more we dwell on it, because of our conviction about Baba, the more we dwell on that statement, I am always consciously with you, the more we will begin to realize its truth. We must come to the place, because of that statement, because of our conviction, we must come to that place where we actually experience his presence much more so than the presence of each one here. And I'm going to say that I see each one of you, and you see me, and you see one another, and that's very real. But it is not lasting. So the effect of that so-called pseudo-reality is peripheral. It has no binding, no motivating effect on what is essential. But the presence of Baba, once it is grasped, becomes motivating because it is staggering. Because it is the only means to that which we unconsciously long and dimly consciously long for. We long for that nameless by putting the labels of happiness, bliss, freedom from anxiety, apprehension, love, but these are all terms that have to be lived. And these terms can only be lived by our not looking for false shortcuts. There are false shortcuts. I do not condemn a person who goes after a false shortcut. We all do. When we become more sensitive, we ache to try to take that suffering from that other person. We ache to give that person bliss and happiness. When we begin to experience that such a thing exists, we long to give it to another. Can you imagine what God's longing is? When in my ignorance I long to give somebody something like that, what is it that God longs for? We must dwell on, we must dwell on these qualities of God. Because Baba must become a real person. Our work is to do that. The effort that Baba wants us to make is that which will make it spontaneous that we should remember him. If we were to experience a drop of his reality, there would be no talk about spontaneity. It would follow as the night the day. It would follow, as Baba says, fauna and fauna phila. The vacuum immediately filled with God. So our work is to use that material that Baba has put in our hands, the quality of his life supremely lived, the directness of his messages to us, and all of these are the strong hemp that pulls us out of the quagmire of our own despair to the safe shore. We must surrender to Baba by working with the concepts that he has left us. Otherwise, he is that man walking down that street who happens to be God in human form, but he's dressed like every other man. He has 2 arms, he has 2 legs, he has a head. He turns, he smiles, he gestures, but he's just a man. We must find his godhood. He has made his godhood available for us to find. That is our work. It's a pleasurable work, because life is not pleasurable without the relief that comes from knowing that there is purpose, that there is love beyond the horizon. Although we can't see it, we can't feel it, we know it's there because he's here. So our work is every moment, and don't despair. When we forget, we'll pick up the next moment. Okay? Our very despair will make us remember that much more the next moment. But use the mechanical means. Put the book by your bed. Take the book in your hand. When you just had a horrible argument with someone, your wife, your husband, or someone else, at that moment when you don't feel like thinking about anything, you use your discipline in a mechanical way to open that book, to look at Baba's picture and stay there until you remember. Don't feel the despair of those words. Now when I hear people curse the chance that was wasted, I know but too well what they mean. Don't wait. You'll be doing it for each other. You'll be doing it for me, because you help me when you don't wait. I help you when I don't wait. We must help one another. No, Baba, because everyone here is different. I have seen such talent among you people. I've seen such energy among you people. I couldn't conceive of how beautifully that talent could be used in the direction of remembering Baba. And then, after you've accomplished that, what help you'll be to somebody else who needs you. You can show the person the way to his inner self, that journey within. You know, we must not be confused by that activity out there. That activity out there must reflect that activity here. This is the policymaker. This dictates the policy. This is the instrument after the policy has been set by our hearts. Baba resides in the heart, not here. We are foolish to think we'll ever find Baba by reading. We are foolish to think we'll ever find Baba by building. We are foolish to think that we'll ever find Baba except by surrendering. When we do anything else but surrender, we do not want Baba. We have to understand that. That's not condemnation. We must understand where we are, because we desperately need to move forward in the real direction. But how can one move in a meaningful direction unless one knows where he is? So we must know our limitations. Do you remember when once Baba said in one of the discourses where superiority and inferiority have to be brought into mutual tension, the more we understand about ourselves, because we really want Baba, we see more about what he is. What is a noble life? We must know, we must be able to breathe that in. Well, the more we understand about a truly noble life, the more we can see how pathetic our own life is. But the great hope is, so therefore that's all the basis for inferiority, to see so clearly how limited we are. But at the same time, Baba said, in me you can see what you can become. So inferiority and superiority would be brought into mutual tension. We have the greatest hope And it's great that through that great hope we see how nothing we are. Because the sooner we get rid of this nothing, the sooner we stop thinking in the direction of its continued distractions and absorptions, and pull back that consciousness that's absorbed and attached, so rigidly rooted. Pull it back. What would cause you to pull it back? Obviously our desires are there, rampant. What causes us to pull it back is beauty, love, the dimmest feeling of love. The personification of that love is our master. He is available. That's a concept. He is available all the time. We are not. You see, this is not to put people down. This is because you respond to that. He is available. We are not. As soon as we begin to realize this, we awaken to a new grasp of Baba that's going to help us. Because to see more and more of his beauty is to surrender more and is to obey more and more. And then that leads to surrender. Surrender. We have nothing to worry about. There is no tomorrow. Life is absolutely hopeless in all of the senses that we know. We don't need anything because we have everything. I think I've covered that. But I really, sincerely mean what I say when I say, let's make that real effort which is inside, quiet, continuous. Let's make that effort to find and experience Meher Baba's presence continuously without a break. That's when we go to sleep, just before we close our eyes, just before we fall into sleep. Let's find new and exciting ways of thinking about the reality that he is, how really close he is. Let's think about the fact that he's right there, because he is, but we must consciously begin to know it. Let's become excited about the fact that we will become conscious of it, because that's true. Let's become excited about the fact that the most indescribable treasure is there, waiting for us, and that the path to it has been made very direct, very short, and very beautiful because of the God-man. Jai Baba. I found that when I return back to Virginia, I will have taken a great deal with me that I got from all of you. The words were one thing, something much deeper was communicated, and I honestly and sincerely tell you that it has been very helpful to me. So this has been my way of being recharged by Baba. I think with that I'll sit down. Let me see if I can think of something. I've been talking really all day, and it's true that Baba has to be felt silently. And by silently, I mean simply that the mind has to be quiet. When the mind is quiet, one feels Baba's presence. You know, Phyllis was talking about what Baba has said about God realization. I really don't care anything at all about God realization, simply because I don't understand what it is anyhow. I know what it is to feel a small amount of relief and freedom and serenity and peace and small amounts of bliss from Baba. That's enough for me. I would like to become totally absent and totally obedient and totally surrender, because I think living will become a great joy, even though I'm very limited. That, I think, is the real thing for us to aim for. Baba talks about God realization, and that's important, simply because he talks about it. I feel that anything Baba says is important, even though I don't understand it, because I believe in him. And so I keep trying to understand and relate what he says. As a matter of fact, I recall sometime, somewhere, that Baba said, you must try to understand these things that I say. And I also remember one time that I think it was in 1958, when Baba asked us, how many understand God speaks? I don't remember who. I don't even remember if I raised my hand. I don't think I did. But I don't know who raised their hands. But Baba said, I don't understand it myself. Before 1965, I think Phyllis touched on this, or maybe Marion, I don't know. It concerned the planned trip to India, the darshan with Baba, and I believe Harry Kenmore was in charge of the arrangements. Is that right, Phyllis? 60 for the 65, the planned 65 darshan. That was cancelled. Because he called me a number of times about it. And then, in the beginning, my wife and I felt that we would both go. Of course, money is always a problem. And you have a family. So we decided that we would both go. And didn't say anything about the 3 children. We thought about what arrangements we might make for the children while we were gone. And my wife is never very far away from the children. So as time went on, we thought more of the burden of going. The financial aspect, taking time off, the arrangements for the children, not saying anything to the in-laws. My wife very wisely suggested that because she said, why have them worry between now and then? We'll tell them just before we go. I jumped ahead of myself. And then, so we were all concerned primarily with the problems, feeling that we had to go, but not feeling the lightness, the joy, the anticipation, but merely looking at the problems. And then as we got past that, we began to feel a little bit of the anticipation about going. And then both at the same time, we looked at each other and said, how can we leave the kids here? So we finally made all the arrangements. We finally sent in all our money for all 5 of us. And then we really began to look forward to it. I suppose the previous meetings with Baba are never enough. We want to be much more receptive. We wanted not to expect anything from Baba. We simply wanted to be a clean slate that he could write whatever he wished. So we began to look forward to this as a special trip. We wanted to gain as much as possible from this trip so that our lives could really become dedicated to obeying and surrendering to Baba. So as the time got closer and closer, our anticipation built up to fervor pitch. And then finally, out of the clear blue sky, came the cablegram canceling the darshan. Well, I was really thunderstruck at that time. I had no idea how much I was looking forward to it. So when it was canceled, it really devastated me. So I didn't know what to do. And again, this is the type of very, very, very sharp conflict. I talked about a different type of conflict in San Francisco. But this was a severe conflict. And finally I had this strong imperative need to find Baba within myself. I could not go through this business of looking forward to seeing him externally and then not having the opportunity, or having the opportunity taken away. So my imperative need was built up to the point where I felt very strongly I had to find Baba within. I would not allow anyone, including Baba, to take him away from me again. Now, of course, this is what Baba had always been emphasizing throughout, that he was within. He was not any other place. In 1962, when we were in India, Baba said something to the effect that we had all been children in his love, but that now we must go home and find him where he really exists within.